Welcome to this very special episode of The Real Event Producer, because we're talking about all things aviation. This is the Aviation Week team and also my fellow co-founder, Mike, from event.video. So welcome, everybody. First of all, congratulations on doing, is it 4 or is it 5 virtual events that you've done?
Lost count.
I think it's 5.
5. I wanted to start, first of all, by asking you, what were events like before COVID, before lockdown?
Before lockdown, events were, they were the best part of our job. We spent so much time preparing for them, but then the best part is being in person with people and seeing our communities and connecting them and seeing old friends. And so, when COVID hit, we lost all of that. Or did we? And then we pivoted to virtual and were able to replicate it in the best ways we could.
For live events, networking is a huge part of it. So we spent a long time looking at different platforms when we pivoted to virtual. But I've been in live events for about 10 years and just never had to imagine what it would be like if we couldn't meet on site and have that face-to-face time. Usually as a conference producer on site, you're in charge, you know the AV team, you've worked with a lot of the speakers before, but we're handing it over to the platform and to, in this case, you, the production company, and that's quite daunting. So I think that was quite a big step change for us as well. And it's just a completely different way to prepare the speakers. Preparing them for virtual is very different to preparing them for live.
Since you've run these events, what's the feedback been like?
One of the things that me and Jackie talked a lot about was that it's hard for speakers just not having any response. So we spent quite a lot of time talking about how we could give them feedback and try and interact with them and to feel like they know an audience is there who's watching them and listening to them, because that's very different to live events, as we usually have really interactive audiences and everybody knows each other, so they joke around and take the mick out of each other, and you have kind of more of that sharing space, and that's harder to do with virtual, I think. So that was something that we had to learn.
I always just tried to emphasize, they are watching you. Let's keep our energy up, because the last thing you want to do is just bore them to death with Zoom, because there are people out there watching you, and we need to keep them engaged. And so having a lot of energy, I think, was really important.
First of all, you both were quite engaged with every session. So you would come on and you would explain what was going to happen, and also polling, which is something we haven't talked about, but results of polls, you'd come back on and kind of with a bit of energy and explain it. And also I loved the headgear and the cocktails and things like that you did as well. Did that come naturally, or did you kind of have to really think, right, how are we going to create a bit of energy on this platform?
I think for me, my first virtual event that I ran with you guys, I was nervous going into it. I was just like any of our speakers. I didn't entirely know what to expect. And then when I watched it back, I was like, oh, come on, Jackie, you can be better than this. Like, you're a fun person. Come on, let's have fun with it. And then after that, I think I really just made a point to inject energy into everything I did. And, if something had a hiccup or something, went a little off, that happens at live events too. And you just have to keep moving and have good energy and make a joke about it. And if your speakers see you doing that on the front end, they're going to do it too.
And I don't think people really mind with virtual if there's a couple of hiccups, and actually sometimes find it quite funny.
The whole world had to transition to this at the same time pretty much. And so everyone was on Zooms all day and they were on these calls all day. And we made a point to do a lot of research because, there is fatigue and people are dealing with this. So how do you make this interesting? How do you make them want to sit with you all day?
And what have your speakers said post-event? And obviously there's a few things I want to know, like break it down from, oh, I've got a cup of tea coming in. Thanks, love.
I love that. One for me.
You just got recorded.
She'll throw the tea over you if you're not careful.
That was very nice of her. What have your speakers said post-event about the platform and about the event as a whole?
Well, just last week we did our military conference, and it was a great compliment. And some of these military speakers that are very used to having things done, in order, they were a little bit nervous, I think, about something different. And one of our generals came to us immediately after his session, and he's like, "Wow, guys, that was better than any of the other ones I've done. This is not Zoom. This is a professional media organization." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, General." But it feels good to have that. You don't want to let them down. This is a really important person, and you want to make it look that way.
The reason that we've got a production company is we want put something out that's professional and that we're proud of, and we kind of expect that that the speakers want the same.
When we're engaging with new clients, like, they want to know, well, why wouldn't we just do this on Zoom or Teams? And I'm curious, like, what your answer is to something like that, because obviously we know what we would say, but like, when your external teams or whatever are saying the same thing, what's your reaction to that?
Good question. I mean, because at the start I didn't even really know that you would need a production company for this sort of thing. And I've done quite a lot of webinars in the first half of this year, and that's one separate thing. I think the amount of considerations and things that had not occurred to us before when you're putting together a whole virtual event is just completely different. We kind of mentioned the polls, so we brought those in to have the interactive element, but just for both the audience and for the speakers, and just kind of playing around with that. It's just impossible, I think, to do that as a conference producer. You're already managing the speakers, trying to make sure that they're happy. I think just little tiny things that had never occurred to us in terms of audio and framing and kind of having the running order if you lose a moderator or if you have somebody drop off. My opinion is, and it's the same thing with AV when we're live on site, is when you're doing such a huge amount of work putting things together, is our reputation, but it's also the speakers as well, and what they feel comfortable with. They see us as a very professional output. We're a publishing company. Aviation Week have a really good reputation. Why do all that work and get those speakers to put something out that's low quality if you're stressing out and upsetting the speakers and putting out something bad, which I think we would have probably done if we'd not had a production team? I don't see the point in doing all of that work over months and months and getting that fantastic speaker lineup and then falling at that last hurdle. It just seems pointless to me.
They now had the opportunity to reach a much larger audience on a more global scale, and that was huge. And so, when they were expressing to me concern, and I'm like, listen, at our live event, it'd be great if we get 200 people in this room. I'm going to get 200 people watching you live today, and then I'm going to get another couple of hundred to watch this after the fact on demand. And that you can't pay for that. It's double the price of what they were paying for. It would be. And so I just tried to make it seem, and it's true. You're reaching more people this way. It's more accessible.
I think that's a huge point. I mean, what about the future? So lots of people now talking about going back to normal whenever that will be. Will it just be how it was before? Are you thinking about things like hybrid events? What are your plans?
Definitely hybrid. We were saying it's really interesting. You worked with us on the Urban Air Mobility Conference, which is flying cars, basically. So it's very exciting.
Very cool.
And it's very cool. What we found was that we've kind of had a bit of a slow start with that event in person because it's quite small. And there's also big influences in China, in San Francisco, in Europe. And so what we managed to do with that event is bring in the 3 different regions. We staggered the program, so we hit the different regions with different forecasts, and we brought in a massive audience, much bigger than we would do with the live event. And that was really exciting. So that's one that I think we'll definitely keep virtual. And then with the hybrid options, that's something we're exploring. I think it will be really interesting to see what happens in 2021 in terms of what people want and expect from us. But I think definitely diversifying our content options, different interviews and different things that we can put out virtually as well as live will be really important. Just getting a bit more dynamic, I think, with what we can offer people and with kind of understanding the capabilities of virtual events.